Today we're going to talk about nail guns. There are two main types, and one is pneumatic, and pneumatic begins with a P. P is silent, but that means they run on air pressure. And the other is electric. And then there's different types of electric. Some are just straight battery, some are battery on the side, but also have a gas cylinder inside, and the battery helps ignite the gas. So we're going to go over all these, starting with the pneumatic or air guns. First thing is, they're literally what they say. They are guns. They shoot nails. So you have to treat it like it's a gun, which means you don't ever point it at anybody, ever. And when you're not using it, you unplug the air so that it can't go off. When you sit it down, always sit it on its side. Don't ever compress the front. Compressing that allows it to fire. So it's got a safety where this has to be compressed before you can pull the trigger, with the exception of our roofing guns. However, all of these can have the safety trigger taken off and be called what's a rapid fire, which means all you have to do is pull the trigger. So don't ever point them at anybody. It's not funny. Seriously. It's not funny. Don't do it. Alright, so we're going to start with the largest nail gun, which is called a framing nail gun. And it's to frame houses, 2x4s. And it can shoot nails that are as short as 2 1/4 inches up to 3 1/2. Generally, we fire 3-inch nails or 3 1/4. All of the guns, the nails go in slightly different. So for every brand and for every size, you have to read the directions on the side to figure out how to put them in. With pneumatic, the most important part is you have to add oil into the air outlet every day that you use it. So 3 to 5 little drops is what you need for an 8-hour day. And that's because everything in here, all these pistons, are metal to metal. There's no gear oil or anything in here, and if you don't put oil in here, you'll wear everything out and ruin the guns. So that's the first thing. That's on all the pneumatic. To put nails in this one, you pull back this lever right here, and it will lock. For that lever to go back forward, you have to pull it back, take pressure off the spring, and then push this button right here. When you put the nails in, all the nail guns, you have to put them in right. These happen to be at an angle. Some of them, depending on the nail gun, will be straight. So with this one, they're at an angle and they're taped together, and then they clip off half of the top of the head. So when I buy nails for this gun, I have to buy a particular type, which is paper glued, so they're together, clipped head. They have to be no more than 3 1/2 inches. I always buy 3 or 3 1/4. And they have to have a certain diameter size, which ranges from 0.121 up into 0.130. So you have to look at that. All that information is on the side. And then the last thing you have to know is what angle they're tilted at. This one happens to be a 30-degree tilt, so it can go 30 to 33 degrees. They're usually pretty far away. They're either around 30 degrees or they're 21 degrees. But if you put the wrong one in, it will jam. Next thing you have to know is you have to put them in correctly. So if you put it in this direction, it obviously isn't going to fire out of there. So I like to have you guys line them up, and then these drop in the slot on top. And then you simply pull back on this and push this to release it, and there's a spring that holds them. If you don't put this forward, it might fire 1 or 2 nails, and then after that the nails slide around and it will jam. To use this one, it's simple. You simply press down on the front, and then you can squeeze the trigger. So after you compress the tip, you squeeze the trigger and it fires. So I will demonstrate that. By the way, the nail guns run generally around 90 to 100 psi or pounds per square inch for the air. They'll tell you on them about what you need. If it's driving the nail too far down, you either have to lower the air, or some of the tips are adjustable and you have to see which one it is. Normally it's the air, especially if the nail's not going all the way in, you're probably low on air. So if you squeeze the trigger first, nothing will happen. you must compress the tip first, then squeeze the trigger. And as you can see there, the air is not high enough. So I'm going to adjust that. It was on 75 PSI. I just put it up to 100, and let's see what we get. And that one's good, nice and smooth. So that's how this works. If you're using a 3 1/4 inch nail and you're going through two 2x4s, that's only 3 inches. So what the framers will do is they will angle it a little bit, and now it won't come out the back side. Okay, let's move on to just a smaller version of this. This is a 16 gauge. That's just telling you how large or the size of the nail. So 16 gauge are these right here, where the higher the number, the smaller they get. So this is 16, and this is 23. 23 is called a pin nailer. There's no heads on them. They leave very small holes. This is for trim only, small trim. This is for slightly larger trim. These usually come in 2 sizes, 16 gauge and 18 gauge. So in order to put the nails in this one, it's similar to the other one where you pull back and it locks right here. And then these also slide in through the top. And then you pull back here and push in on this metal tab, and it allows them to come forward. Again, always put 3 to 5 drops of oil in for an 8-hour workday. And then to attach the air, you pull back on this little coupler, and you have to push really hard till it's all the way on and let go. If you only push and hold the coupler back, it will just bounce off. So you have to push and then lock. You'll know if it's on because the hose didn't fly off. And then same thing, you're going to compress down on the trigger and, compress the tip and squeeze the trigger. So these will only fire 1 nail for each time you pull that trigger. The extra air shoots out the top, and what's nice is most of them have an adjustable top. The area right here is the hole, so if it's facing you and hitting you in the face, you can rotate it. Okay, so that's 16 gauge, which is pretty similar to the 18. Then you've got the 23, which is really tiny. This one, the nails actually go in slightly different. They don't slide down through a slot. You push down on this button, and it opens up. These are tiny, and there is no head to them. So when you put them in, on the nails, they put an arrow facing down so you don't put them in upside down, because it won't fire right if you put them in upside down. So they just sit into the side, and then you just push this until it clicks. Add a couple drops of oil. And then this has an extra safety trigger. The tip doesn't compress. So instead, you have to pull back the first trigger. Now it will fire. And because you don't have to compress the tip, you have to be very careful with this one. If you pull back on this and then squeeze that trigger in midair, it will fire a nail. And if it's pointing towards your feet, it could stick in it, or worse, into your leg. Where the other 2 guns, you must compress the tip first. This doesn't have that. Next, we have roofing guns. So they come either with a safety trigger, just like the first 2 nail guns, where you must compress this, and then it'll fire 1 nail, or it will come where if you squeeze this, hold this in, as soon as that compresses, you can fire multiple nails. The nails go in slightly different on these. You have to push down to unlock this side, and the nails actually come in a coil, so they fit in there better. So they sit on this little shaft right there, and then you open up the front and you feed them in. But the key to this is it looks like you put it in like 3 or 4 places. You must put it all the way to the top. If it's not to the top, it will not fire. Then you close the plastic, and this goes over top and locks. Again, a couple drops of oil for an 8-hour day. Now this one has a safety trigger. I wrote that on the side so that we know. So you can see I didn't get on all the way, so it bounced off. So when I compress the tip and pull the trigger, it'll fire one nail. Okay? If I pull the trigger in and then hit the tip, it will do nothing. Pause that. Okay, now on the roofing gun, they mostly come with a rapid fire trigger where you do not have to compress this for it to fire. So, first of all, make sure you put oil in it. 3 to 5 drops for an 8-hour day. To put the nails in, it's different. They don't slide in through the top. Instead, you get these coils. They come with a rubber band around it. And then you open up the side. You push down on that button right there, and then this opens up. And then you just simply feed it in to the top. It looks like you could sit this in multiple spots, but if you don't put it all the way up in the top and then all the way in, it won't fire. So just like that, close the plastic. Oh, and it sits on this little round piece right there. So sit them in, put it all the way in the top. If these won't close, you probably did something wrong. Okay, so these can have a safety trigger where you have to compress this and squeeze and it fires once. But ours are the non-safety. What it does is allows you to shoot these in faster. All you do is hold the trigger in, and as soon as you compress that, it will fire. You can fire 2 or 3 nails per second, so you have to be careful with this. So I would demonstrate that. Okay, so I'm gonna squeeze the trigger, and as soon as it touches, it'll fire. And it kind of bounces up, so I can fire multiple nails quickly. Or, if you only want to fire one, you compress the trigger, you compress the tip and squeeze the trigger, but you have to let go fast. So I'll squeeze and let go. If you hold this trigger in, it will fire more than one nail. So this gun can be dangerous if you're not careful. Okay? And as you can see, these aren't going all the way in. That means I need to turn my air tank on. So I'm going to do that now. Now I'm going to move on to the electric nail guns. So that use batteries. So here is a 16 and an 18 gauge. And the batteries slide onto the back. So they're very similar to what I showed before, the 16 gauge, which is pneumatic, except this one's battery powered, or the 23 gauge little tiny pin nailer. Then we have one more battery powered. That's a combination. It uses a battery and a cylinder full of gas. And this is so it can get enough power in order to fire framing nails. So this is the same as this framing nail right here, a little more compact. Nice not having a hose. I'm going to start with the 16 and 18 gauge. So even though they're the same brand, they look the same, the nails actually go in a little bit different on them. This one slides open like our little pneumatic 23 gauge. But this one, the bar slides back and they actually feed through the back. And that keeps you from putting them in upside down, because you can see it's like a T shape for the head of the nail. So even among the brands, the different sizes can be slightly different. So on this, you simply put the battery on. And then this is a safety trigger, so after you compress the tip, it will fire one nail. And it will only fire one, which is nice, so I can keep squeezing this trigger. The only way to fire another nail is to uncompress the tip, and then recompress it, and now to fire again. These nails can't fire super fast. You need about 2 seconds, 3 seconds in between each one for the motor to ramp up. So that's the that's the 16 gauge. 18 gauge is exactly the same. Like, these do not get oil. Only the pneumatic do. So this one also has the safety trigger. Nails slide in right there. If it ever jams, these open up from the front. You can see that somebody left that open. So all I have to do is just put that on there and close it. It's nice to be able to clean them out from the front. Oops. So compress the tip. Oh, one thing I forgot to say that's super important is your hand should never be within 3 inches of where you're going to fire the nail, because the nails can hit a knot, hit another nail, and bend and come back up. So you want to keep your hand away from where you're going to fire the nail. That's more important with the smaller, well, it's important with all of them, but more important with the smaller ones because they're more likely to bend than a framing nail. Never put your hand anywhere near this. Okay. Now we're moving on to the last electric nail gun. It's by a brand called Passload, and this is the one that has the battery and the cylinder. The nails for this one are interchangeable between the larger framer because it's the same brand and they're the same angle, 30 degrees. A lot of times they're not interchangeable. If you buy a Hitachi brand, sometimes you can only use Hitachi nails. So this one, it's got a couple of safeties. One, when you put the battery on here, when you first put it on, that first click, it even shows you that it's off. That's just storage for the battery. You have to now click it in one more time to turn the gun on. So now this gun's on, but I'm going to back it up one so I can show you how to put the nails in. Put the nails in, you pull back on this slide till it locks, and this is similar to the 16 gauge nailer. They actually go in through the back, so you make sure they're going the right direction. These are the clipped heads, paper taped. If you ever wonder what, there's a little red stuff at the bottom or yellow on the other ones, that's glue. So as the nails go in, the friction heats the glue up and they stay better. Some of them can have little rings on them, those are called ring shank nails, and that helps them stay in better also. So these just slide into the back, and then you push the button on this and it goes forward onto them. So in order to use this one, you turn it on by pushing the battery all the way in, and then a little light will blink green saying it's ready to go. A lot of times on the first time you fire this one, it won't get enough gas in the cylinder. So when I compress, without squeezing this trigger, this has a safety trigger, when I compress this tip, you'll hear the cylinder turn on. That's injecting gas into the cylinder, and then when I squeeze the trigger, the battery ignites the gas to fire it. So once in a while on this one, if you compress the trigger or the tip and squeeze the trigger, nothing happens. In that case, just uncompress it and recompress it. And then leave the battery plugged in until it stops rotating. Now I can turn it off. If you stop it too soon, it won't put enough gas back in the cylinder for the next time you fire it. But this one is a framing nailer. That's about it.